And then, of course, it says paperwork shall normally attend, or there's got something to rewrite a little. Paperwork doesn't attend, so it says paperwork shall normally attend or support each agenda item.
Yeah. Support is probably a better word there. Yeah. Or just the support.
Get rid of
just
the
leave
attend.
that. Just leave the. Get rid of the attend. Yeah.
Attend or.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Shall normally
And
support.
on
yes.
this, and I think there's 3 5-month or 5-week months where you have 5 Wednesdays, and it says the 1st and the 3rd, I think, and then the 2nd and the 4th. So is there anything or consideration given to the 5th when it?
No, nor does current policy, and I think obviously when we had a 5th Wednesday, if we wanted to do a special meeting.
It was sort of an unwritten, you know, just to leave it that way then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
On what is on the next page, which is 2 down in the lower corner, under C, workshop, begins C, workshop. And if you go down to C sub D, it says all workshop agenda items and supporting materials shall be submitted IAW. What?
I apologize for using that. In accordance with, I should have spelled it out. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is kind of unnecessary. I guess the only reason I kind of put that in there, it's in the current policy, and as like a workshop paperwork is somehow different, and at least that would be one possible reading of the current policy. So I just wanted to make sure that the workshops are no different than any other meeting. We're going to handle the paperwork the same. Yeah. Yeah.
So could you spell that out?
Yes, absolutely.
Jeez, I didn't know what that meant either.
Okay.
All these people and their acronyms.
Okay, then the next.
I'm not sure where I got that one.
Then in E, the next one, workshops shall normally be scheduled on the 2nd or 4th. But they may be scheduled on both.
Yes.
I just don't I read that
Oh, okay.
either. But
okay.
This is or, but it's not and or both.
We could maybe just make the or into an and or.
And or, just
Okay.
so we're,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
Slash.
Yep. Yep.
And again, down towards the end, 14.160 gets into necessary paperwork. Again, that's going to be we've said it's going to be a minimum of a memo. Okay. And on the last, on 14.165, other number 1, it says the BOC at any public meeting reserves the right to amend its agenda to include executive session. What about putting the authority in there for that? That's just a question that's come up at some meetings in the past.
We could put the broad general ORS, which is what, did you remember, John Huddle, was it like 192 something?
Yep, it is ORS 192-660.
Okay, we can add that.
Okay.
And should that always be an agenda item? Because I know on boards that I've been on, they usually just put that executive session at the end, just in case.
Right, and what I've seen other people do that as well. That wasn't our practice where I came from, and the reason is if you have it on there, in my opinion, it makes people think it will be occurring, versus the state law allows you. So usually when we know enough in advance, we put it on there and we say what it will be. And if it comes up like the one this morning, I'll let you know, and we can announce it. So the law allows you to go to exec session from any regularly noticed public,
Okay,
your
as long
general
as it's
meeting.
legal, that's all that's necessary.
Thank you, Commissioner.
But a lot don't know that. I didn't know that. You know, I thought you had to give some notice, and showed me
Well,
where the specific statute was that you don't.
Right.
And that's possibly
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
that was put on in this agenda item in other places.
Okay, that's,
so.
that's all I have.
Schools are always being sued.
I know.
So, do we have any other questions or comments? We have a motion to approve.
I so moved that we approve the revised board meetings and workshop policy.
As with
As
this.
corrected.
As correct.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for the question.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Boyce?
I'm going to appeal to the board with the earlier decision today to have 9A.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, not 9A. David Barnes is still in the audience, and he was on the agenda. It is item 8, old business and pending actions, and I think that he still has the right to speak and have his questions asked. And so I'm appealing to the board to change that direction and let him make his presentation. So do I need a motion on that?
I think you would need a motion and a second and a vote because the agenda was revised by a motion and a second and a vote.
So I'll make the motion that we put back on the agenda item 8, old business pending actions, with Chair Huxley's improper use of what we perceive to be breaking the rules and decorum of the meeting, basically since January, and allow Mr. Barnes to speak. And I'm going to offer some discussion on that he again was on the agenda with supporting information and why that we thought that should come before the board. And on the 18th, still waiting for a second, but on item 9A, discussion of, for the 18th, the general meeting, discussion of disbursement of public records and the policy regarding this issue. Sue Gold, County Commissioner, 10 minutes. No other supporting information, and that person was allowed to speak. So my motion remains on the table.
Mr. Hull, how about the
So we don't have a second. This motion dies for a second.
So Mr. Barnes, if you're part of the Harbor Fringe, you would be allowed to speak. I want the whole public to know that.
I don't know how Mr. Huxley is allowed to cast.
You're out of order, Mr. Barnes. You're
Let him
not
speak,
recognized.
and then maybe we can get some resolution,
on it,
sir.
and we can take another recess.
I'd like
and we can
Commissioner,
take
I'd
further.
like Council Huddle to please
Threaten
describe
us.
to me how
Again.
Mr. Huxley's allowed to vote, cast a deciding
We
vote.
are going to take another
on disciplinary
5-minute
action against
recess
him.
because Mr. Barnes and Commissioner Boyce
Silence,
are
you
both,
will be
are both
silenced.
out of order, and we will pursue that from there when we come back.
Meeting after
a
meeting
5-minute
after
recess.
meeting. You will be silenced and have been.
Oh, I got it. Yeah.
Okay,
No.
okay, we're back after the recess.
Junior high, though. 5 years I made it there. Then I went to high school. It's like heaven. And then I got to college. I knew I was in heaven.
I hated high school, but I love college.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 2:28. We're back in on the record after the recess. We're on to agenda item 9B. Consideration to refer to the voters the question of road fund loans. And open this to county council. Oh, I'm sorry, it was, well, county council, Administrator Hipp and county council were both instrumental in this, but Administrator Hipp's on the agenda routing slip.
So I think probably everyone is aware that there was, and I don't have the number in front of me, but
House Bill 3435.
yes, thank you.
I have a copy for all the
Okay,
commissioners to
very
look
good.
at.
Passed that grants to the local governing body
Take one and pass
the
it.
ability to loan road funds to other agencies, organizations, and there are certain restrictions in the state law, although they're fairly broad. I would say most people would call them, or i.e. minimal restrictions. As also everybody is aware, we have I think roughly $15 million in our county road fund reserve. So
That was
it's
34.
It's high. It's
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
30-ish, 30-ish,
Okay,
I
I'm sorry,
think.
way off, way off. I guess that was just in one account. That's right, that's right. That was what was with the local government agency. Anyway, so thank you for that correction. So anyway, it's a substantial amount of money. And so the question that has been raised is it wise or appropriate for a local governmental body that has substantial road fund reserves to be in a position of lending some of that reserve out to other agencies, even though, for example, an example is given to me, well, how about the port district, the Brookings Harbor Port District, and I guess they owe something $4 or $5 million to the state IFA. They're paying like 6% interest. We could loan them that money so they could pay off their debt to IFA at a slightly lower rate of interest and still make more money ourselves than we are currently making now. So that was given to me as an example by someone who is in favor of this particular policy. But obviously, once those monies are lent out, then if there is an urgent problem, emergency of some sort, particularly regarding a washed out road or other catastrophe, whatever amount of money then was lent out would obviously not be available to meet that need. So there are, I think, good arguments to be made on both sides of the situation. But one of the proposals that was discussed with staff and with the chair was perhaps letting the voters, that no loans would be carried forward, would be actually occur until a voter preference, and it's only legally that a voter preference vote was taken, but then the county commissioners would then, and I'm not sure of the legal requirement, and I'll let John Huddle comment on that, but at least the county commissioners would have a good idea of whether the voters were in favor of that particular loan or were in opposition. And I'm not sure, Mr. Huddle, would that be a binding, or is the ability to bind the commissioners with that or not?
Thank you. So, right, that's a good question, and I think the analysis, and so the role I played in this is I was asked to draft up the sample of the ballot title, and I think it broadly says that the county cannot lend road funds unless the voters approve it. And then in the brief description, it said the law doesn't say, you know, who approves or authorizes the lending, so it can either be the voters or the Board of Commissioners, who are under statute the co-equal kind of governing bodies. I received a courtesy call from the sponsor of the bill, David Brock Smith, and he explained to me that the bill, and if you have it in front of you, section number 3. So the funny part about how they change legislation, it's section 1 of the act, but it's actually subsection 3 of the statute. So if you look under section 1 and then you look 3A, it says Monies may be loaned under this section only pursuant to a legally binding intergovernmental agreement or loan agreement entered into by the governing bodies of the borrowing taxing district or the county and the lender county. So his understanding, and it would be what's called legislative history to interpret this, is that the governing body means the Board of Commissioners, and therefore that the Board of the statute, that the sample explanation of the ballot title is erroneous, and that the law does say it has to be the Board of Commissioners. And he then had his state legislative council review it, and the legislative council from the state was of the opinion that a voter's prohibition on loaning out of the road fund to another taxing district would only be advisory. Now, the other part that
I'm sorry, I didn't get, forgive me, I didn't get that. That it would only be advisory, legal, maybe I did see that.
So,
Sorry.
and well, that's okay, Commissioner. And there was one other thing that there was actually a question as to, let's pretend it was not an advisory opinion from the voters, and they weren't just saying, we don't think you should. And let's say they were really trying to say, you shall not, and the voters of the county adopted a county ordinance saying, you know, the county can't loan road funds unless they get voter approval, and that became a county ordinance. What my conversations with the state legislative council was who, for instance, who has authority over whom or who? I never know how to use those things. Thank you. Who has authority over whom? And is it the voters have authority over the Board of Commissioners in this matter? Do the Board of Commissioners have authority over the voters? And the response from the Legislative Council is they're really co-equal. So let's say, for instance, the Board of Commissioners directed us to prepare a ballot title, and we put it to the voters. And let's say, notwithstanding Commissioner Smith's intent and the drafting, that it be the Board of Commissioners, the governing body, who approved the loan, and that let's say that the voters felt like, no, we can say whether you can loan this or not, and they did it in an ordinance. What Legislative Council told me is that if the voters enact an ordinance, 3 elected officials, or even 2 out of 3 elected officials, could then do another ordinance to say, we rescind the prior ordinance of the county, because ordinances are just at a co-equal level, and governing bodies are co-equal to the populace on simple ordinances, where the voters could more or less trump or bind the commissioners to some course of conduct or substantively would be if the voters adopted a charter, which is then akin to a constitution, which trumps legislation. And so in this case, we would just have legislation versus legislation. So it's kind of a abstract or theoretical question as to would it just be an advisory vote. It would not bind a future commission, even if the voters did not intend it to be an advisory vote. And that's the analysis from the Legislative Council. What Commissioner Smith's opinion is, and his intent in drafting it, was it be the Board of Commissioners to, and excuse me, State Representative Smith, that it be the Board of Commissioners who decide, and it says governing body, and therefore that the voters could only do an advisory, not even a real substantive piece of legislation. So in one way, it would, according to State Representative Smith, it's intended that the only thing the voters could do on the current status of the law would make an advisory opinion. But even if they could, and some ruling was that they could, to decide substantively whether we could make a statute, a local ordinance, to prevent the commissioners from approving a road fund loan without voter approval. A subsequent commission could overrule that because it's simply local legislation. So, and that's the opinion I received from Legislative Council. There's no case law on it. So I'm sorry, John Hitt, I think I might have over-answered your question.
That's okay.
And I don't even know if the commissioners here followed the thread. so I'm
Well,
happy
could
to
I just
ask
say one
questions.
thing?
Sure.
Bottom line, what you're saying is the voters could be advisory, the commissioners ultimately have to make the decision.
I think.
That's what,
That's the position of the sponsor of the state legislation, Representative Smith. If you took the contrary position that the voters could substantively prohibit the board from loaning road funds by a voter-adopted county ordinance, the opinion I received from the state legislative council, and I asked for a state parallel, was they said, that's why our Oregon Constitution has so many things to it, because if the voters are given a choice of adding to the Constitution or making a state law, they prefer to add to the Constitution because it's more binding on the legislature than a state law. So that's the analogy. Again, there's no case law. I think it's a pretty decent analogy. But again, that's the bottom line, Commissioner Gold, is there's arguments that even if we were to put this question to the voters and State Representative Smith's side did not prevail in some, let's call it a ballot question, there's a thread of legal support that a subsequent board could overturn the vote of the county population on a matter of local legislation.
just by making another ordinance.
Yes, almost as if you were to change your own ordinance or an ordinance of a prior board. So,
I'll add to that, if I may, because we had numerous scenarios that the three of us, County Council Huddle, Administrator Hitt, and myself had when I brought this up originally, was that you have, in Oregon, you have the initiative process, you have the right of referendum, or the referendum process. So that if because he received back this opinion that they were co-equal, okay? And they being the people, the voters, and the governing body of the general law, in this case, general law county, Curry County, that you had, because of that, if you had an ordinance and that it was passed by or an order, but an ordinance typically, which has more authority or more meat than an order or a resolution, and it was not passed with an emergency clause and was the normal 90 or 91 days after passage, the people on any such, in Oregon, on any such passage have the right of referendum. They can gather a defined number of signatures, and if they are successful, they can put that referendum, bring it to a vote of the people on a ballot. If they vote in the affirmative to what that referendum measure was, then that would overrule the ordinance that was passed by the governing body. Okay. If it were an initiative on the part of the people to do that, even without an ordinance, they could create an initiative, or in a sense an ordinance, by the prescribed number of people, of registered voters, and could do that. It's about half the states in the union have that right, half don't. Oregon is one that does. The argument back to the co-equal opinion that county council received, and we talked about this, was that, well, then if the people did that and went to all that trouble, and that's a lot of work if you've been involved in one, and I've been involved in two initiatives. They weren't referendums, but initiatives. I talked to a person that was involved in a state initiative. This is the same thing, a lot of work, but in all cases, the people can do that, bring it to a vote of the people at a ballot measure. So if the people, what we talked about, let's say that if the people passed either this approach that's being proposed here as the board putting forth a ordinance, but for a vote of the people, yes, if they were co-equals, which appears to be the case, the next Board of Commissioners or the same Board of Commissioners, okay? But let's say the next Board of Commissioners made up of different individuals could vote to basically negate or put aside that ordinance. The argument that I had, or I would have, is that if the people voted, the majority of the people voted that they wanted a certain regulation, a certain ordinance, a certain rules, I dare say that the Board of Commissioners would be foolish at best to not heed what a majority of the voters wanted. And not that it couldn't occur, but I think it would be, and then the voters have other options to proceed. That's why they'll think it's a good thing. I'm not sure whose hand was up first. Commissioner Boyce?
Let me read this, because I don't agree that the responsibility and the governing bodies are equal. Short paragraph here from Council Johnson, Legislative Council. Per the Curry County BOC website, the commissioners serve as the executive branch and perform legislative and quasi-judicial functions of the county. That describes a governing body. Nothing prevents the board from asking the opinion of voters concerning whether an intergovernmental agreement or loan agreement to lend county road funds is a good idea. But nothing in HB 3435 or other law requires the BOC to do so, nor would an affirmative vote by voters legally compel the BCC to enter in such agreement, which is basically, I think, as I understand, Council Huddle, what you said. Only the BCC is in its executive capacity, possesses the capacity to negotiate and execute the agreements contemplated in House Bill 3435. Executive branch. The governor does not go to the people when he or she has a tough decision to make, if it's in the best interest of the people. Nor does the president. It's called representative government. We're here to make the hard choices. No surprise. I am in favor of this going, in particular for the South County Emergency Room facility that we need badly. Once again, we know 14,000 people down there without an emergency facility. That's shocking to me. If we go before a vote of the people, we're going to lose another minimum of 6 to 8 months, absolute minimum. And that affects our citizens, that affects our people, that affects our health care overall. If we go before the vote of the people, maybe we need to do an advisory, maybe we need to have some sort of, some means of contacting the people. I'm not opposed. I think the majority of the Curry County citizens, though, expect us to make the tough decisions. And if this is that difficult, when it is less than 1% the county's getting right now, that money, they can get perhaps 2 or 3%. Those are the figures you've heard bannered about. That excess money that they get could go back to Sheriff's Patrol. And that is maybe our first priority. Most people would agree. Yeah, I just think we're responsible to do the executive part of our program, where the legislative branch of the county, the executive branch, and the judicial, we have to make some tough judgment decisions. So that's our job. It requires a majority vote. This is a good business decision if we want to do something that is good for our county.
Commissioner Gold, then County Council.
I just have one small comment. We have like a pyramid of authority, and at the top of that pyramid is the citizens of Curry County. Underneath them is the commissioners, and then all the departments and that sort of thing. So,
County Council.
Thanks. I think one thing I picked up from what Commissioner Boyce was saying and the Legislative Council's opinion on this, if you look at House Bill 3435, the text there, and it, again, I don't like the way it is written. It has section 1 and it has parentheses 1, and then after it goes ABC, you'll see a 2 in there. The amount of loan may not exceed, and then 3, money may be loaned under this only pursuant to a legally binding intergovernmental agreement or loan agreement entered into by the governing bodies of the borrowing taxing district. So, and then it talks about, if you look on next one down, B, and then it's got the capital A through E, that talks about what the loan agreement must contain at a minimum. There could be other conditions in there. So I think the point that Legislative Council's making, and it's a legitimate point, and it's something that I also wasn't focused on when helping assist on this agenda item for the board. But even if you can go to the voters for decisions, the courts have established a doctrine of whether a vote is on a matter of administration or legislation. And I think what Legislative Counsel is saying is this HB 3435 describes executive, or, I mean, he used the word executive, but I'll use the word administrative. I think we use the chief executive officer, chief administrative officer in the same capacity. But again, in the law, if you're asking the voters to approve something, the courts don't allow them to approve what's called administrative items. And we saw that a couple of times, and most recently when we passed our marijuana tax. If you remember, we did two parts to that. One was just the voters can approve yes or no, are we going to do a local tax on marijuana in X%? And then if they did that, the board adopted another ordinance that talked about all of the fine details of how it comes in, how they report, you know, can we do a contract with the state to do our collection and distribution, those kind of things. And that was all administrative, and so we divided it up. There's a counter argument to Legislative Counsel's position. Again, when you look at this, the bill, Section 1, I'll call it basically enabling language. And why I call it enabling language is because prior to this, I believe the state law was that you cannot loan out of road funds, or you have to use road funds only for road purposes. And so there's a body of case law that you can't really touch it. What Section 1 in this act was doing is saying these 4 counties, Curry, Klamath, Yamhill, sorry, 3, excuse my math. But anyway, these 3 counties can use the road funds for these inter-district loans. So that's enabling clause there. And then one argument could be that's a very broad legislative delegation. And if the voters wanted to say, we're just talking about subsection 1 and not the loan itself, but just the ability to loan, again, we're getting into some abstractions here. So the idea of this administrative legislative distinction, there's a lot of cases on it. They depend on the facts. I think it would be something that would have to be addressed if the board did want to go forward with this concept. So those are, you know, it's a legitimate point that would have to be addressed. So just wanted to go ahead.
Excuse me, if you would explain what that is again, that would
Well, it's called,
be addressed.
It's the distinction between whether the voters are, so the initiative and the referendum process are to allow the voters to choose on matters of legislation. And so there's been a body of case law that analyzes whether the voters are deciding legislation or something that's non-legislative, quasi-judicial, for instance, executive, administrative. And it usually comes down into the executive or administrative versus legislative argument. And what, again, the reading between the lines for me, when Legislative Counsel from the state said this statute is simply executory, or it's all about administering your road fund, and it's a matter of administration. In other words, currently we're allowed to invest the road fund, and we put it into the pool of investment. And that's, I think, typically seen as kind of an administrative matter, not legislative. And so what they're saying is this is just an alternative to that investment. You're making an investment as a loan versus an investment as sticking it in an account somewhere, and you're getting a return on it, and there's a risk return. Regardless, these are arguments, but I think, and then legislation is, for instance, we shall impose a tax. Boom. That's the legislation. And then what we do with that tax, who gets the money out of it, all these other different things, if we're going to have penalties on late payments, those kind of things are the administration of that tax. And so what I think Legislative Counsel is saying is this HB 3435 is simply an option to administer the road funds versus a legislative decision. Now, again, the counter to that is without Section 1, you know, the legislation authorizing the loans to be made, the prior legislation was that you couldn't. So again, there's arguments on both sides of that issue, I think, but that could be, so, and usually how this goes is you submit a ballot title, and then there has to be a decision that it's administrative or legislative, and they can go forward. The other example we've had in my time here was we had some fellows, people who, citizens who wanted the board to adopt a Second Amendment resolution. And it had a lot of components in there that said, you know, who's gonna do what and all these things. And my analysis was that the proposed ballot measure that they had too many pieces of administration in it. And I recommended that, you know, some of the pieces of it be struck, this, that, and the other. So there's just, I think the general rule is the more broad the statement, the more likely it is legislative. The more detailed, such as Article 3 here, in this House bill, the more like it is administrative. So I'm not trying to confuse the issue. I'm trying to give the board what the pluses and the minuses and let's call them the hurdles or the hoops that we would have to go through if we were to proceed on this. I don't want there to be any thinking that this you know will not have some challenges that we'd have to overcome before it could go to the voters, in my opinion. So and this is new information that was provided just recently since we published the agenda, which is how it's supposed to work. So yeah.
Good.
I just,
Commissioner Boyce?
thank you. I don't see it as that complicated. And there's other issues out there beyond the hospital, but that's number one. And so maybe we have to involve the public with a workshop or something and see, you know, what the sentiment of the public is. You know, I'm going on the assumption that people in Brookings desperately want and need a emergency room, and it's, you know, I don't know where the amount would be at this present time, but yes, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add, it's 1 million.
So it keeps coming down.
Yeah, my most recent conversation with
Thank you.
Mr. Melman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. So we're talking 30, what did you say, there's 33 in the road fund reserve?
Something close to that.
Yeah, so we're talking 2 million maximum, and the emergency room would be open in 3 or 4 months, what the information I have. So is a workshop in order, or are we, how are we going to conclude with this today? Because there's a real urgency here, in my opinion.
I you know, I had clearly requested this be put on, before I ask for a motion, that the, certainly legislative, quasi-judicial, the road fund, and I think pretty much any county funds that are invested typically are in very, very liquid, low interest bearing, secure, well, nothing's guaranteed, not even these, you know, ultimately, but we're talking from something very short term where it's liquid to very, very long term. And not that that means anything different as far as the legislative versus quasi-judicial, but it's in the lending scheme, it's an entirely different ball game that you're in when you go from liquid, you know, you can turn it over tomorrow, to it's tied up for 20 years, okay? And that's what we're talking about. But that said, it still would be my hope, and certainly that I would ask for a motion to request that, be it Administrator Hitt, certainly County Council, proceed to the next step with, that would be required to put this on a ballot measure for the vote in, I believe it's in March of 2018. That would be my request for a motion. And I think when we had talked, we were talking just approximate times, you know, which is how we got here. It was, you know, we don't want to spend so many hours. We corresponded back and forth or talked back and forth. And I think there's approximately 6 or 8 hours total, if my memory serves me, for us to get to this point. But I would ask that we go to the next, or a motion to go to the next point, or the next phase in putting this as an actual, ballot measure with language before the voters, and deal with as challenges may come up, which typically I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, County Council, when you put the actual ballot title is where, if that goes out and is approved, then anyone has, 10 days or 15 or 20 days or something to challenge. I would expect that that's where something would be challenged. So that would be Administrator Hitt.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, if I may, with all due respect, disagree with proceeding, and if the Commission directs, we will do it, and no problem. But here's my perspective. I disagree for two reasons. One, a broad philosophical one, which, everybody has their own personal philosophy. My own personal philosophy of government is that detailed particular matters, such as whether it's wise or unwise to make a loan, and if it is wise to make a loan, what would be the terms of those loans, are far best left to the elected officials and their administrative support folks. So I just, in general, do not agree. I mean, I realize it's legal. I don't mean in the sense to disagree it's not legal, but I don't agree with the concept of referring specific kind of detailed governmental operations or actions to the public. So that's just me. But more importantly, I oppose this, doing this, because I think it actually, and then if the voters were to go ahead and say, yeah, we don't want you guys lending any of this money without going to vote, without us approving it in a separate election, is that it would restrict us in a way that I don't think is wise, because I think emergencies could come up. Might be in the city of Brookings, it might be a city of Port Orford, where there is an urgent need, maybe a police, public safety facility is destroyed or severely damaged or whatever, where there would be a need for funding, sometimes, maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million, maybe a couple million, that they could not find anyplace else. Short term, i.e. they need the money now, they got to get going and correcting this problem, where this could be a very beneficial tool to help address that. Now, I do agree with you, Mr. Chairman, there needs to be some sideboards here that go beyond what's in the state legislation. I think it would be very unwise for us to enter into long-term loan agreements, and very unwise for us to obligate very much of the county road fund. But I think for short-term, by short-term I don't mean just a few months, but maybe 3, 4, 5 years type loans, and loans of a very limited percent or dollar amount of what we have, I think could be a useful tool, again, for addressing future public needs that would be nice to have in our toolkit. And not that we necessarily ever employ it, but nice to have it available. And again, obviously, if that were to occur, that type of emergency or need, obviously the commissioners would have to approve it, and it would have to be all the details worked out in advance. But I think there's some merit to perhaps, rather bringing back to you a ballot proposal or ballot title of a specific ordinance, and I realize it can be overturned by a future commission, and I regret that, but that's the way it is. But I think if you were to set down some specific guidelines in an ordinance, that would at least make it clear what your desire is
To the public?
To the public. Yeah. So,
Well, that's what would be ultimately proposed anyway here, would be, if we were to proceed this direction, would be to put an ordinance before the people. That's what we had originally talked about.
Yeah.
Just what you mentioned as far as an ordinance with specifics.
No, I didn't understand, and I
No.
apologize if I misunderstood you,
I think
Mr.
we'd always
Chair.
talked about use the term ordinance.
An ordinance, that's
Correct.
correct. But I didn't hear it as an ordinance that simply restricted.
Well, I don't think we
Oh,
got
okay,
into any
okay.
of the particulars,
Okay,
but just the
okay.
use of the term ordinance.
all right,
correct.
fair enough.
Uh,
Yeah.
Commissioner Boyce?
Would you categorize a short-term loan as 3 and 5 years? Did I?
I would.
understand?
Yes,
That
I
makes-
would.
That made sense to me. I
Yes.
just wasn't sure that I understood that.
Yes.
And then, of course, the other concern I have is special election, $4,000 to $5,000, I think.
There are costs.
And that's out of,
Yep.
right out of our general fund. Is
This
that
was
correct?
scheduled, though, Commissioner Boyce, for a regularly scheduled election.
March is not regular, is
I
it?
think March was.
March
I
is,
thought it
yeah,
was.
yeah.
So it's still,
We-
okay,
we
thank you for that
discussed
correction.
Absolutely, it would not be held
But it's
as
still
a
gonna
special.
cost, it's still got money that would be expended for that.
No extra cost because it's a regularly scheduled election. If you have
So
a
I pick up-
special election, you absorb it all.
Okay, so it's, I did pick up on something additionally you said, but doing an ordinance gives us a chance to go for the people and say, this is what we're thinking under these categories. Also, really having an opportunity to highlight that this is a very secure loan, especially I should say loans plural and not be specific or try and be specific, but especially on a short-term basis. So my take is, yeah, it's really the potential of a good business decision. And again, stating the obvious, that's our responsibility here. So I would make a motion that we direct staff to just work on either the possibility or with a recommendation of a workshop and really clarifying what our ordinance would be. And before we vote on that, get it out to the media and let the public know that this is, and maybe it's not time yet until we do have some agreement or specifics on where and if we would want to loan that money.
Administrator Head?
Just one other idea, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, is if we were to bring a draft ordinance to you for your consideration of what would be the restrictions, rules, et cetera, to any potential loaning of those funds, we could also then include with that ordinance an automatic referral to the voters, hey, do you like this ordinance or you don't like it? Yeah, it would have to be a yes or no, up or down vote. But one thing we would know, if they voted yes, they'd be okay with how we're defining restrictions on a potential loan or any future potential loans. And if they voted no, then we'd know, okay, they either didn't like what we proposed or they're just opposed, period, to offering loans. So we could do an automatic referral. It would still be the question of, exactly timing. We could probably get it on the March or May ballot or whatever, but just an idea.
Just clarify, excuse me,
Commissioner Boyce?
just clarify again what you mean by automatic referral.
Ordinances can be passed that then are by the governing body, then are held in suspension. And I'm speaking from the
No,
city
I
side.
know exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a county thing that opposes this, but on the city side, you could pass an ordinance, hold it in suspension while you referred it to the voters, and they would vote yes or no. You like this ordinance? Yes. No, you don't. And then if they said yes, the ordinance would then be effective after the election. If they voted no, then there'd be nothing. There would be no ordinance or no harm, no foul kind of thing.
Under that approach, though, we'd still lose 6 months. We wouldn't have an emergency room facility.
Yeah.
If I had the support from the board here,
We would lose
as that
time.
is the #1 project, and I hope you're right on the $1 million. That's what is needed right now. It's a chunk of money, but again, it's going down. Thank you.
Can I say just one thing about the emergency room? Ginny Razzo said that they will not borrow one more penny because they are so far in debt, they cannot afford to borrow one more penny. That was her exact words.
They've been told that 2 years ago.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying. She was talking
Or
about
they
getting
would.
grants from All Care. That's the direction they're taking, rather than getting a loan. And those were her exact words.
I had Commissioner Boyce?
That might be an additional, to have a legitimate workshop and try
We
and
could
get,
certainly do that
to
as
get, to hear that up close and personal direct, that if that's what her concern is. I understand they're leveraged, but there's some really good things happening within the Curry Health Network, and so the road fund established to the board to the Curry Medical Center in South County just has incredible potential for our county and gives us just one aspect is ability to compete with other places, and that's why the city of Brookings is really got their fingers crossed, as you know.
Just a quick comment to Commissioner Gold, and again, I corresponded at length with their previous financial officer prior to their getting finally the funding for this hospital, and they literally, you know, confirmed that they did not have the wherewithal to obtain any further loans from any reputable lending institutions. They were tapped out. They did not have the wherewithal to service the debt, the interest debt on the loans and the bonds that they did have. I'm not understanding they still don't. You know, that's time will tell on that, but the interest rates were not that high, but the principal and interest was very high as far as the dollar.
Well, I did ask a specific question to Ms. Razzo, and she said about interest rates, and they are paying as high as 10% on some of their loans.
Commissioner Boyce?
Mr. Huxley, your extensive discussions, was that before the new hospital, I'm assuming, was completed?
Yes, and these weren't just discussions, this is in writing.
But a lot's changed on that, and that's why we all need to be educated here. This is critical to our county. And if we could get that done, that one thing done in 12 months of of this board's actions and history, I think would just be saying a remarkable thing to the public, where our priorities are and where our sensitivities are to their needs. 60% of the folks live south of Pistol, and they are exposed.
So are we looking at a workshop concept then, possibly? I'm looking at Commissioner Gold, I'm looking at Commissioner
I'm
Boyce.
fine with the workshop.
Yes.
As far as the details, more with the concept that Administrator Hitt talked about, as far as the details, and that would, you know, give, you know, certainly interface with County Council on that also. Okay, I'm okay with that.
Okay. We will plan accordingly.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
you'll just get back to us with a workshop date?
Right, and actually it's on your agenda coming up, so
Okay.
if you want to, we could defer it till then.
Yeah, just talk.
Okay. Commissioner Boyce?
Yeah, thank you. If truly they're paying 10%, I've not heard that before. I hope that's
On
not.
one of their loans. They've got a
Okay.
number of loans.
Okay, well, this would be almost an incentive to consider a $2 or $3 million deal if it really was rational and solid and a good plan to help them remove some of that debt, which again, in the interest of finance, comes back to the road department, which helps our patrol, our whole, you know, again, you know that the rural parts of our counties are exposed, and I just can't state that enough. So it's the whole plan is I can't see of this. There was so much work went into this bill. It had tremendous bipartisan support. I don't want to say unanimous, but I know it was close to that. And so here we're sitting with a good product, per your mention earlier, where the road fund and that portion is really stands to benefit, not to mention the county. And it's also an opportunity for us to bring our county together. Thank you.
I guess a last comment on your interest, because they had the facility down in Brookings is made up of several bonds, different CUSIP numbers, most of which, now this goes back almost 10 years now probably, whenever they built it, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Most of that is at 7%, and they held the bond issuance back because I was looking at purchasing some of your muni bonds, but it was held back by the financial entity I don't remember what the name was. It was a major
Under-
financial,
yeah,
deals
underwriter.
in government bonds. And the reason it was held back was because they didn't have enough security, collateral, to even issue the bonds. And the weaker your financial wherewithal is, the higher you're going to pay in interest. And again, most of that 13 million or 14 million was at 7% on it. And they can't change that until 2020, is what some of the correspondence I had with the finance. Anyway, we do have a workshop. I don't know if there's anything on it at November 10th.
In November.
I'm sorry,
8th.
November 8th.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And then the
Currently-
next one would be, well, I don't even.
Well,
see
it'll be the
next
day
one.
before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
That's why I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
put it
not
on
good.
there.
No, okay.
There's currently nothing for November 8th. We could do this, or if you want to put it off into December, that would be the other option.
I'd rather not, if I may.
Commissioner Boyce?
Well, I'd sure rather not put it off. I do have a scheduling conflict. I have to leave at 11:15. So could we do a 9 o'clock workshop on that morning? On the 8th.
I don't have a problem with that.
Much appreciated.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Okay. So
So-
then, as of now, the only item for that workshop would be the.
I think
As
we
I
would
know,
we should
as I
just keep
understand.
that as a dedicated.
Okay, and we can certainly do that. And it's 9 a.m.
9.
So a week from today?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Go on to agenda item 9C, order approving the amended travel policy. And we had one speaker on that also. County Council?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I also have, if you could just pass that down, keep passing, no, just keep passing. Yep, I got yours here once we get all the right numbers. No, pass it all down. Yep,
Keep passing?
yep, and then you stop there, and I think now everybody's got one, right?
I have two copies.
Good, those are the two exhibits that were supposed to be
Okay,
attached
okay.
to the travel policy in the agenda packet that were not. One's an odometer mileage
Okay.
form from the road department, and I think the other also is from the motor pool. It's the vehicle checklist. So if you like, then I'll just start talking about the amendments to the travel policy that are in the packet. And they derive from the discussion at a meeting where I was absent, but my understanding is there wanted to be some amendments to allow for emergency travel or emergencies or things that just weren't expected, weren't planned for, those kind of things. And when I came back from being absent, I was told this is what was some of the direction of the board from the meeting, and I said, well, gosh, we've already got that in there. There's a provision at the end for unexpected travel, and the county accountant can approve it. And I said, but you know what? We've got a county administrator now. Why don't we fix this thing to reflect that the county administrator, will be part of this? So you've got most of the travel policy is the same except where highlighted. One of the highlights on, I think, the first page is a clarification. There's another highlight in there that changes from the county accountant to the administrator, and I may have left county accountant in there more than once and probably needs to be eliminated. So it just says county administrator. I'm not sure if I did that. It's on the second page. And then lastly, similar to our other county policies and orders, and we're doing, this kind of comes from looking at the code enforcement. The other thing that I made clear in this is that county vehicles are county property. You heard interim county administrator hit say early on that he has these broad delegations of authority. One of the delegations of authority to the county administrator is direction and control of county property, physical and personal, or real and personal property, meaning buildings and cars. And so what it says here is that the county administrator is in charge of all the cars, no matter who's driving them, whether it's an elected official or not. And so it's got these 2 forms to fill out for that. And, you know, the county administrator can have a key checkout provision, all these kind of things. And so it delegates or acknowledges his authority there. And then it also says that violations of this policy are enforceable under our general enforcement order, which basically allows for all level of enforcement by the board, including a fine. So that's what it does. It basically, and then it again, it has the unexpected expense part in there, which was clarified. So that's what happens that's what's proposed on these changes to the travel policy. They clarify that unexpected or emergency expenses are already in there. It changes it from the county accountant to being the county administrator, and then it adds a provision on penalty, and then it describes the county administrator being in charge of all county property. So it was updated to actually more reflect the county administrator and then his enforcement authorities and things like that. And that's all I had, unless there's questions.
Well, I move that we approve the travel policy as amended. Do I need
Discussion?
to say something about
Do we have a second?
fixing the typos too?
I'll second it for discussion then.
I
Okay.
definitely want to hear all about fixing typos.
What are they called?
Clerical errors, Scrivener errors.
Scrivener errors,
I
that's
think we're
it.
allowed to do that
Yeah.
after.
Yeah, we
after
are.
this.
Okay, so.
Well, we're going to, just a couple figures here, a couple clarifications. I used the Chevy Traverse, which is a 2012, 2 days ago, and took a group up to the Jekyll Fire burn area. We ended up with 35 people, followed us up there. That's the only time I've used that for probably 3 months. It says here, economic development, no miles, other departments 718. So maybe that's under economic development, but the total miles on that car was 2,900. For the and I want to clarify something. It was explained to me that the first two, or the last 2 numbers, I mentioned this administrator hit the other day, represented the year. The last 2 numbers of the county code for each individual car. But it's the first 2 numbers. So anyway, the Tauruses that I've been using, the one in particular, 07089, is only a 10-year-old car. But it's more than adequate for the times I have to go to Salem, in the valley, whatever. And it looks like year-to-date miles 1974. Is that? And this is from the road department.
Thank you. So, Commissioner Boyce, I wasn't prepared to talk about the contents of this form.
Fair enough.
This form was intended to accompany the order to say that it shall be completed by people using the vehicles. So it's this form, and then the other form, obviously we won't use the form looking like this. This will be cut in half, this one. But really, this was only for illustrative purposes, nothing substantive, and I don't have anything, I don't have any knowledge. I've never been involved in any of this business with these odometer statements, so I couldn't explain
I think this is just,
anything
well, this is a typical monthly form that goes out from the road department to the various departments, and it shows whatever the assigned vehicles are to that department. And then if the form's used, and I'm not sure if it was here the month before, I know on an earlier month there were some other departments that showed up because they had also used the form, and then with that they had attached that other form that you just mentioned that you had to cut in half. So these two these 2 vehicles are assigned to the commissioners. There's others, they've got a whole list of the different vehicles within the county that are assigned to the various departments. So
What can I anticipate, because I've used up my allotment, apparently, until what, June 30th, is that right? So if I need to travel out of the county, or even within the county, Can I assume then I'm not going to have a car available, and if I use one, I'm going to be penalized, or can be penalized, the highlighted information here?
I would answer that question and by saying that the purpose of this is to approve the revised policy for questions like that, because it falls under the administrator, county administrator. Now, I would contact him separately and, of course,
Okay, the other-
communicate with him
Okay, thank you.
for
The
those
other-
questions.
Well,
County
if
Counsel?
I could, in the abstract though, I think this, the draft policy or the policy in front of you they're voting on, in the abstract, it's not to your particular question, but it would allow, if there was unapproved, because again, this does allow for travel above the budget with pre-approval and things, but if it's unapproved travel, it allows for penalties, is my reading of it and how it's drafted.
But that hasn't changed.
I think it's added in the yellow there as far as the
It's
ability
highlighted,
to
yeah.
enforce, that, all the highlighted is
Correct.
additional text, so that.
Correct.
So in a sense,
Well, I
it has
highlighted,
changed.
you know, but what was
Oh.
highlighted on the 4th page is under 6.
Okay,
There was a few on the first paragraph changes, and then I think from 7 on is all italic, so all of that was added.
right, and that's a lot of the
Correct.
enforcement
Excuse
part.
me.
So in the abstract, I don't want to talk to any particular ongoing things, like you said, Mr. Chair, I think the first step would be to talk to interim administrator Hitt, but this specifies that, yeah, there could be enforcement taken against any particular person who violates, elected official who violates the travel policy.
Just
Commissioner
one
Boyce.
more thing, I think just one more thing. The other part of that, in addition, or included with number 7, excuse me, is persons using county-owned vehicles shall complete all forms. Can I get help on that?
Sure.
Sometimes I just don't have the time. I try not to overwork our staffs because they keep quite busy, and so to ask them to do, and for me to find the time with, my list just keep getting bigger, as I'm sure yours as well do. But yeah, I mean, I'm just going to state before the board, I need a car. And I don't know, that this has been an issue since the very beginning in the budget process. When I see the other departments, they stay at Best Westerns, they come and borrow the Traverse, more power to them. They're conducting important county business. And I think after knowing me 10 months, you would be confident that I am incredibly frugal and I am well prioritized with, especially after the fire or during the fire, and yet the work's just beginning. And so, boy, am I ever going to need the help of this board and the support of this board. You know, we did have one person on the 18th that suggested that I wasn't effective, but I don't think you're going to hear that or see that and I could offer that to you in my commissioner's comments today. It might be a little lengthy, but I've taken the responsibility of making sure the board knows what my activities are. And I believe that I'm building a relationship with Administrator Hitt so that he knows as well. I mean, I really don't have any secrets. And so, but I do have a job to do, and I'm taking that very seriously. And it's a critical time. Thank you.
Okay, before we have did you have any other comments, Commissioner Goldberg?
No.
Before we have a motion, there was one public speaker comment slip from Mr. Barnes.
Hi, I'll be brief. It's getting late. Last time that you talked about this, Commissioner Gold, you mentioned that if we have rules that we don't enforce, we look bad, and there's no real point in having the rules. If you're going to enforce this rule, I would please ask you to enforce your other rules as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Do we have a motion to approve the amended?
I think I already gave that motion.
Did you already motion
Mhm.
to approve? Okay, I'm sorry. We did not have a second?
I think you seconded.
You did.
I think you
Okay,
did.
okay, then we got off. I didn't think we had gone there. Okay. Any further discussion? Call for the question?
Aye.
No.
Aye. Agenda item 10 is announcements. Board vacancies on Curry County Budget Committee for the North County. There is one opening, that is the Budget Committee opening for this year, because it rotates. There's Curry County Public Transit District Budget Board meeting, I'm assuming, although I don't know.
Vacancy.
Is that a vacancy?
Yeah, these
Budget
are all
board, I'm sorry,
vacancies.
okay, I'm
Yep.
sorry. Is there one vacancy on the Curry County Compensation Board also? Because what are
I'm
there?
not
There are
sure
3
on that one.
members, and I'm assuming that, are they North Central South County or not? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'll have to find
I would
out.
think that, I'm sure they rotate, so I would think that there's one opening, and we can get that clarified.
I think there might be 2, but
2 openings?
might be.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if they have geographical
Yeah,
limitations
I'm
on
not
them.
positive, you know. Maybe if we could just find out, and then we'll address it the next board meeting.
We will.
Thank you.
Is this information also posted on our website?
I know the Budget
Oh, not
Committee
yet.
one is,
Okay,
John.
thank
Oh,
you.
the other 2 are as well, John?
But we
Okay.
typically do, right?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
And then how long do you want to post it for?
I think the batteries.
What was that all about?
I think the batteries are dead. He's fighting with his microphone, and he's losing.
Halloween
So-
was last night.
We could work that out outside the meeting. There's now a November 8th, next Wednesday, Board of Commissioner workshop at 9 instead of 10 a.m. There's a November 10th. The Curry County offices are closed for observance of Veterans Day. November 15th will be the next Wednesday county general meeting at 10 a.m. November 23rd, the offices are closed for the Thanksgiving holiday. And we would go then to agenda item 11, which would be the report from Administrator Hitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm probably not going to be able to finish this in 5 minutes, but I'll do my best.
Okay.
Was that a challenge?
Association of Oregon Counties Annual Conference is November 14th through 16th at the Hilton in Eugene. I know we have a meeting there. It was my desire to, on the 15th, obviously, is our next meeting, to attend much of that as I could, and I was going to, pay my own way. There won't be any county money involved. But any rate, and I know Councilor Huddle is kind of the same thing. He's going to try to attend much you can.
The county lawyers group meets on Thursday, so I would not have to leave for that conference until Wednesday afternoon. So I would offer that, if interim county administrator Hitt wanted to attend that conference, but the board nevertheless wanted to have a regular meeting, I could fill in his stead as far as shepherding the board through some of the staff level questions on the meeting.
And then maybe we could keep it to a minimum so you can get out of here.
That'd be another
Perhaps,
good,
but,
good motivation. Yes.
Commenting.
But it's just, what we're running into is a scheduling conflict, basically, and I think some of you elected officials may be going to the AOC as well, so whether we'd have a quorum for a meeting is probably the first question, then whether we have to staff the
True.
meeting. So that might
Yep.
be a topic of discussion or polling right
Right,
now
yeah.
informally or something.
So I know Commissioner Boyce is planning on going.
Yeah, in all sincerity, I'm hoping that both of you can go, as I've communicated, and I'm very interested in introducing you to some very key people that understand a lot of our issues here and would be very helpful to us. And I think getting you acquainted with them is a great opportunity, and for both of you. I don't know how long or how much you're going to be able to go, but that's my request.
I will be here for the meeting.
Okay.
And I'll be here too.
Okay. All right. Thanks for your input there. we are in the process of adopting or developing a new county website. So a practice website kind of basically is set up, and I want to appreciate and thank Commissioner Huxley for his many hours he's put in on this. We're not quite live yet, so we're probably going to let staff do some editing on the site, get used to the site, and then with the idea that it would go live, become the, when you click on or search for Curry County, the new website is what you get, probably in 2 to 3 weeks. And in the meantime, on our current website, we've condensed the Chetco Bar fire links to one. We had, I think, a total of 4. It's down to 1, and then that takes you to 4 sublinks, 4 subpages, and for additional, if people still interested, Chetco Fire Bar information. Recruitment of county administrator. The recruitment period ended midnight, October 29th. Oddly enough, not Halloween. Probably should have. I don't know why they didn't make it Halloween, but they didn't. I communicated with Prothman Company. They have 7 applicants. I have not been able to reach Matt Wankel, retired city manager from Bandon, is supposed to review those applicants, and then we're supposed to set up a time with him to come and present what he considers the preferred 1, 2, 3, whatever that number is, candidates, and then but review them all with you, all of the applications, and then you all decide who you want to interview. So that the original schedule was that meeting with Mr. Wankel and yourselves would occur sometime in November. I haven't been able to pin him down to a date yet, but I will try to do that. Then with the idea you would interview your selected candidate or candidates in December, and then make that selection in December with the idea that the new permanent county administrator could start work sometime in January. So we're still on that schedule, but I'll let you know as soon as I know more from Matt Wankel. Community Development Block Grant, Head Start Brookings. We are in the process, and I want to thank Brenda Starbird as well as John Huddle for their work in trying to run down people that could do the inspection as well as the appraisal. We still haven't, we're getting bids for both right now for the inspection and appraisal. So neither has occurred yet. And the process, I would have to say, I don't know if Mr. Huddle would agree or disagree. I think the process right now has gone a little slower than I thought it would. But we hope to be able to get an inspection done and an appraisal done. The appraisal will probably take the longer. We may be out 4 or 5 weeks before an actual appraisal could be completed. Anything else?
We are time tracking our activities.
Well, we are time tracking our time. All 3 of us, been mainly John Huddle, Brenda Starbird, and myself involved so far.
A little bit of Eric Hansen.
And a little bit of Eric, yep, that's true.
Information.
What is the topic again here? I'm sorry.
Head
Brookings,
Start.
Head Start, CDBG grant.
The next steps.
Proposals.
Right, yep.
Remember where the board said, let's take those next steps, and so we're doing the appraisal and the whole building,
Inspection.
whole hazard inspection with a commercial inspector. And that's been part of the pace, is finding a commercial inspector, so, and getting a quote from one.
And that's on the Pine Street location.
I think it's on Old Redwood or Alder.
Whatever
It's-
the
Yeah, whatever
original.
the-
Redwood.
The one you've been to,
location.
Commissioner.
The original
It's
location.
the old library.
Yep, the old library, yep.
So I've been there 4 times, and I'm getting less interested in the rationale behind remodeling that building. It is an old building. So-
I toured it, that building as well, along with Commissioner Boyce, and I do have to agree, it's to remodel that building into a truly effective, modern facility, it's probably gonna.
Does it still stink?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna just keep.
It's gonna be a lot of money to do
Yeah,
that.
on my own, I'm just going to keep searching to just determine if possibly there are a better option out there for this
Yeah.
this project.
I'll defer, since we're going to have an executive session on public records, so defer any comments until after or during our executive session or after that. One request I would make is you noted and announced county offices will be closed for Thanksgiving holiday November 23rd. In my experience, November 24th, the day after Thanksgiving, is a very unproductive day. Because there's very little public input, there's very few emails, there's very few, I mean, an extreme, phone calls. So I was wondering, I would like to be able to close county offices on the day after Thanksgiving, November 24th as well. But obviously I don't feel that I have the authority to do that on my own. But if you would allow me to do that, I would appreciate it. I think it would be overall more to gain than to lose, in my personal opinion. And I've gone through experience both ways, of having city facilities open on the day after Thanksgiving and have them closed. I never once, and when I was in Lebanon, we had them closed, I think, my last 5 or 6 years there. Never had a single complaint from the
Is that
public.
considered one of the employees' holidays?
So it would be basically adding a holiday in effect. So it would be a paid holiday.
So it would be using one of their available, it's not increasing the number.
Well, what I'm proposing is it would be increasing the number. Now, that's the other option we could go, is that it would, so the problem is you really, it doesn't make a lot of sense, at least in my view, to have just kind of, if you will, a skeleton crew here. So I would rather just close offices, and have it be a paid holiday, so-called holiday. I mean, in fact, it would be a holiday for everybody, rather than have a very small group here with little interface with the public and little interface with other staff members, because typically if the city facilities, county facilities are open that day and you want to communicate with another staff member, or you know, a good percentage of the time they're not here, they're taking their own vacation time on the day after Thanksgiving.
Could we know the financial ramifications of that before we make the decision?
Should be zero.
If it's zero, I'm fine with it.
I'd have to see that to
Believe it?
believe it.
Well,
You can't, I don't think we can just add an extra holiday, paid holiday.
What I think, so all of our holidays and all those benefits are in our personnel regs.
That's true.
It sounds like you're anticipating changing the personnel regs.
well, ultimately, that's correct.
Well,
yes.
The only other thing that in the current ones, it says that if there's going to be any deviation from those, it has to be in writing. So I don't think the board could verbally say yes. They could give you direction to bring something back, which I think.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
So what I'd say is, if they give us direction to bring something back with all of the pluses and minuses and the number crunching and stuff, then they would have a decision to make.
Yeah, I'd rather
It's
have
kind of
some
a floating.
numbers.
I mean, in the policy too, there's at least, I don't have the policy in front of me, but at least one floating.
I think there is one.
or-
If there's a floating holiday, then that would go for the,
Yeah.
Right.
there are two floaters?
And,
Yeah, two.
Oh, and Julie's
two.
here.
Okay.
So
Oh,
I
Julie's
would
here,
say,
yes.
you know,
Okay.
that it could be required to, you know, to use a floater, but
Thanks. And interim administrator Hitt, Julie Swift is here to come back to us with the order on the
Right.
Doug Robbins request.
Right.
I didn't know when you were ready to bring that back to the board's attention. She's waiting to present
That
that
we
to
had
the
that
board.
earlier this morning on the.
Very quick, because you put our exec
Okay.
session, oh, no, I'm sorry, that's Doug Robbins.
Okay.
Sorry, I was conflating the two. Yeah, we can do that now.
are you done?
But do you have any?
Well, let me just finish. I
Yeah,
got
why
a
don't
couple
you
things real
finish?
quick.
Yeah.
Louis, and so if that's okay, we'll bring back on the day after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, with something, you know, from the existing policy, but
Yeah,
I
right.
would not approve just adding an extra holiday on
Yeah,
top
I'd
of all
really
the
want to know
holidays.
the financial
you know.
ramifications
No.
before I voted on something like that.
Well, and we'll
Okay,
lay it all out.
okay.
Okay, that's good.
Just to let you know, Louise Karlstrom has returned as a temporary full-time employee in order to get caught up with last year's books and to ferret out all of these grant status particularly in regards to the Brookings Airport, and also help train David Marshall, who starts in about 10 days. And I think you're all aware.
Also in the neighborhood today.
But yeah, on his own time. So he's paying visits and doing some groundwork. I gave him a stack of paperwork to read regarding our financial policy and several other things.
Good.
So he's doing all that in preparation for starting on the 13th. And then I think you're also aware, but I just thought it would be good to formally recognize that Doug Robbins has submitted his resignation, and with great regret, I accepted it. Doug has chosen to take another position in the Portland area, in part to be closer to family members. But so we'll be beginning the process of recruiting his position. Julie, did we set a date for officially starting to advertise for? Is out there already. All right. See,
So when is he going to be
She's too fast for me.
gone?
Last day is December 1st or 15th or something like that. It's in December.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And other than perhaps the matter that Doug brought up this morning regarding the sick leave, that's all I have.
Okay, so Julie, would you come up, please?
Julie Swift, payroll and HR. And just to give you a little background on the floating holidays that we have,
Yeah, good.
it's been asked many times to have, especially in union negotiations, to have the day after Thanksgiving as a holiday, an additional holiday, instead of doing that in the past, because they already had one floating holiday, so we gave an additional to handle that.
So it's already been handled, basically.
Yeah, so it's out. That was the reason for the second one being given. So, and to exempt employees, since they don't get overtime, they actually have 3 floating holidays for the year. And that's the fiscal year. If they don't use them, they lose them. So, anyway,
So how many employees actually show up day after Thanksgiving?
it's a real skeleton
many.
crew, especially with several offices closed on Fridays. You know, you got community development is closed, assessor's office is closed,
Already.
road department's
Yeah,
closed.
yeah.
So, you know, there's several that aren't working anyway.
So if I
Yes.
understand right, it really doesn't cost the county extra because it's a one of the 3 floating options.
It could be.
It could be.
Or
Yeah,
if someone.
that's an option. Yeah.
Or you
Okay.
could have
Yeah,
people
thank you.
use vacation, which of course then would cut down the vacation liability.
Right.
So
Right.
it depends on how you want to handle it. If you want to give it as a holiday, or say you already have the holiday, or take vacation, or.
My point too would be, and I don't want to, we'll bring this back, but my point too is there's not a lot of purpose in having people come and be non-productive, which is, I think, pretty much what happens the day after Thanksgiving.
I think I don't think the clerk's office is eligible to close.
No, they are. I confirmed that with Renee.
Because I
Yeah.
know that was always something that
Yeah.
they couldn't be closed more than so many days.
Yeah, but they can be closed that day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, we worked on an order for this sick leave situation. The title is in the matter of an order allowing a retired employee's sick time to be given to an employee in need. Whereas Roadmaster Doug Robbins, to be known as Robbins, appeared before the board at its regularly scheduled meeting of November 1st, 2017, and identified an employee who was experiencing a FEMLA OHLA leave qualified medical condition, qualifying employee, and whereas qualifying employee has exhausted her accumulated paid sick leave under Article 18 of Curry County Personnel Rules, and whereas qualifying employee is eligible to receive transferred sick leave under Article 18, Section M of the rules, and whereas Robbins explained that a road department employee retired effective October 31st, 2017, now known as retiring employee, had accumulated 444.5 hours of unused sick time. And whereas prior to retiring employee put in writing his offer to contribute all of his accumulated sick time to qualifying employee, but the rules limit contribution to 40 hours from any one employee. And whereas Robbins has requested the Board of Commissioners to deviate from the strict application of Personnel Rules Article 18M and allow retiring employee to contribute greater than 40 hours to a qualifying employee. And whereas the county personnel rules give the board the power to deviate from its rules and use discretion in making employment decisions, and Article 1, Section A requires such deviations or changes by written authorization. And whereas interim county administrator, county personnel officer, and county legal counsel recommend deviation from the rules to change leave donation in this instance from 40 hours, 1 week, to 240 hours, 6 weeks. And Robbins advises there will be no adverse effects to the operations of the road department. And whereas this does not replace Article 18M allowing others to donate directly to the qualifying employee, but will be a bank of time for her to draw from if necessary. Now therefore, the Board of Curry County Commissioners hereby orders that effective immediately, 240 hours of accumulated sick time from the retiree employees be put into a sick bank, in quotes, to be available for use by the qualifying employee through January 31st, 2018. What this sick bank would be, it would allow her to receive donated time up to 240 hours from other employees, which is allowed in a calendar year. This would be a sick bank if she goes past that initial 6 weeks of use, which would take her into beginning to middle of December. This additional 240 hours would allow her to draw on that if needed to make a total of 12 weeks of paid leave available to her, which is the length of family medical leave. So it would carry her paid through that period of time. So again, if she didn't need all that, when an employee donates sick time, that leave is right away taken from this person and given to the person that's receiving it. So their person is given whatever time people are donating. What this 240 would be, and we did this previously when Dan Crumley retired, it would put this money into a bank of time, 240 hours that I would monitor and keep track of, that if she needed time past what she was donated, she could draw from this bank. So if she only needed, things go well and she only needed maybe 10 hours in a pay period because she had appointments relating to this issue, then she would only get 10 hours from that bank. So, and then if it's exhausted, if she ends up using it all, then that would be it. But it's kind of just in this extenuating circumstance, giving her a little bit more.
County Council?
Is it anticipated, I mean, that, again, so the law allows 12 weeks of family medical leave for a qualifying condition. This person has a qualifying condition. I think it's anticipated this person will need the 12 weeks, but they don't have enough vacation time, and our leave rules only allow them to get donated 6 weeks worth. What we're allowing is from this retiring employee another 6 weeks. So if this person ends up having to take the whole 12 weeks, they would receive compensation during that time, so within the year. So that's just the idea. That's the practical impact of it. I think, Julie, is that
Yes,
more or less
that's correct.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
You have a question, Commissioner Morris?
So you're okay then?
Yeah, and I actually worked on the draft of this, and I said that I spoke for County Administrator Hitt saying he recommended it, and that Julie Swift recommended it, and I recommend it. I'm more or less saying it's permissible to do, and I couldn't find a reason not to do it unless County Administrator Hitt has some thoughts on it. But
I'm kind of a split mind on this. I'm not opposed to it. I do think it can, when it's this large, certainly a smaller one, I would have no qualms or reservations at all. But when it's this large of a donation, I do have a little bit of concern, and it's not so much of a concern that I would recommend to you to vote no, but it is a concern that it does set a precedent to some degree. It does, I think, or it can, I should say, can have the effect of people saying, well, I'll just burn my sick leave as I earn it, and it won't matter if I do have a serious medical condition because somebody will always loan me the sick leave to, cover my serious medical condition. I don't think that happens very often,
Well,
but I was in a situation where it did happen
we
once.
do, before someone can receive donated time, they have to have exhausted all their own anyway,
Right.
of all time, vacation, sick,
But
everything.
but in my experience, some people will kind of use their sick leave as they earn it. I'll have a cold, or
Right.
I've seen that happen before.
yeah.
But then
so-
again, they have to exhaust all vacation before they can receive
Yes,
sick time.
yes, yeah.
And-
But again, sometimes they all use all their vacation too, so.
Sure. And this only applies in FEMLA qualifying,
Right.
which is slightly different than just I
That's
have
true.
a cold or whatnot. So there are some limitations on the leave donation program aside from your general sick leave. So the restrictions are FEMLA qualifying, and then the issue with the FEMLA is the hazard that they're going to be away from work for a long time. They're already by law allowed to be away from work for 12
Sure.
FEMLA weeks. So, anyway, so that's the idea there.
So I just have one question. When they donate their time, do they have the option of saying, I want it to go to a certain individual?
Yes.
Okay, and so most employees are well aware of those people who abuse the policy.
Correct.
And I know personally, if I knew someone were abusing it, I wouldn't donate the time. So, I'm for it.
So we ready for a motion?
Just last question on the sequence, which comes first? Is there an order? Does the donated time by individuals that can't exceed 40 hours, does that required for the
first.
first 6 weeks?
Yes.
The lump sum 6 weeks donation can't come first. That
Right.
has to trail the first 6 weeks.
And I think that's how, I think this,
Okay,
that's what
just-
says this doesn't replace the,
Okay,
the
okay.
allowing of people to donate.
Okay. So if they don't receive the first 6 weeks donated from at least 6 different people,
Right.
what happens?
They could receive only 80 hours donated,
Okay.
and then
That's
this
it.
240 would kick in. They
Okay,
don't have
so,
to get
okay,
240
okay, so
from
you don't,
other
okay,
people.
okay,
Right.
okay,
So whatever is donated by
Okay.
others, and then this would be
okay.
to pull from over and above that.
I make a motion that we accept the, is it a resolution?
It's an order.
Order.
It's an
Order.
order.
Second.
What's, that we, oh,
Accept
that, as read?
As
Okay,
read.
Okay. Second.
Thanks for
so
the
do
work
we-
on that,
do
by
we
the
have
way, all of
any
Well,
further
particularly these
discussion? Call for the question?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye? Thank you.
Thank you, Julie and John.
Okay, we have commissioner updates, and I thought I had Commissioner Gold first. I think
It's okay.
Commissioner Boyce was last time, but okay, we'll just go in the same order. Commissioner Boyce?
I have a 4:15 conference call, and I know we have an executive session, so I'm going to delay my report, unfortunately. But I do have some handouts. The only thing I would like to add is that we have a serious job search now for a new roadmaster, and there's a lot of people in this community, or these communities, believe that's the hardest job in the county. I think ODOT has a website that we might be able to take advantage of to avoid another agreement with Prothman, but I'm sure you've already thought of it, but we need to really expedite that. I think it's 22 employees, as you know, and big shoes to fill.
Winter's coming.
Yeah, too.
I think that's all I have. I have some handouts here. Everything that has to do with recovery on the fire and prevention. And I only made 2 copies, so if you'd please pass that to Commissioner Gold. I'm working with 2 different fire recovery groups.
Okay, that's 2 different documents.
Yes.
One copy of 2
Yes.
different documents.
And this is the President Trump's statement on forest management changes. There's a letter I did, a week ago, maybe more, to the Environment and Public Works Committee, which is the name of their challenge is wildfire mitigation. And that's to Senators Barrasso, John Thune from South Dakota, some really rural representative senators that understand what we're dealing with in Oregon. So here's your copy.
Okay, that's the
That's
same
all I have.
document that I just
Yes.
passed to
Yes.
Commissioner Gold?
And I also had a lengthy conversation with Rogue-Siskiyou District Supervisor Rob McWhorter, and it's hard sometimes to trust the Forest Service, but I think that there's been enough collective effort that we might be able to do some significant salvage timber harvest, and he showed the courtesy to me to call, and then he's going to have a written document that he'll provide for all the other counties. Specifically in his district is Coos, Curry, and Coos, Curry, and Josephine County. And I want to take him at his word, and he seems willing to make every effort to accelerate this to where we could actually be harvesting trees and haul them to the mills possibly as early as mid-May. Realistically, probably the 1st to the middle of June. So what that would do for our economic recovery, our watershed recovery, all the above. So I'm going to keep it brief. That's all I have today. And I'll be a little more extensive on our next general meeting. Thank you.
Commissioner Gold?
In the interest of brevity, I've already said enough today.
I'm going to have just a few brief comments here. One, I received an email last night from the surveyor, Raleigh Smith, that he had just passed this federal surveyor exam and now has the license credential number. It's apparently the newest available credential for surveyors to be able to work in certainly federal lands, Bureau of Land Management, et cetera. It's a big deal. I mean, it took, he was studying for months on this exam, of course, on his own time. And it was a 6.5-hour exam with various different sections. And you don't pass one, you don't pass the exam that time. So it was quite an accomplishment. So certainly congratulations to him. These other two, and I've heard there was reference again today a little bit on who filled out a public records, a request to speak, and who didn't. And we were on a couple of weeks ago where Catherine Wiley, had spoken on an agenda routing slip that Commissioner Gold had, and there were some, comments that she had, but why didn't she have to fill something out? And back and forth between Commissioner Boyce and Commissioner Gold a little bit. There was also reference that in a prior meeting, Connie Hunter had filled one out. Therefore, the other individual should be required to fill one out. I wasn't sure at the time, but I did check because I was sort of challenged a little bit. And did check with the clerk here, John Jesuit. Connie Hunter did not fill a slip out. There was and again, because that came up again today in some of the general conversations, there was also on that same meeting, on that, I believe it was the 18th, to the best of my recollection, that I questioned only because of the slip that I did see and the date on it, that Commissioner Boyce had either not submitted that on time, and this was on the individuals calling in, I think, ultimately from Josephine County on the marijuana issue. And, but I said it could have been that it was just the wrong date was put in there. That showed it was late. I later confirmed with, and then again, Commissioner Boyce said absolutely it was put in on time, to me. That was the response. I'm paraphrasing. And I certainly wasn't going to question that. But I did look afterwards. I had straighter hit on this very issue. There was no agenda routing slip that was submitted on time for that item. It was none. Nobody submitted one.
Was that for the workshop?
Yes, and this has been verified with Administrator Hitt. There was a agenda routing slip that was filled out the afternoon of the following day, a day late, but it was filled out by Administrator Hitt. So just for the record, that those are the facts.
I'm out. If
So,
I may.
well, no, let me finish my comments, please. Okay. So those are my comments. Okay.
If I may.
Commissioner Boyce?
Administrator Hitt, did you tell me you filled it out that on my behalf, and kind of, I mean, it was a kind of a neat moment that you were covering my bases and said you did get it in on time.
I did, you know, and when.
And it was a full week, correct?
Well, you and I, and that's when Commissioner Huxley brought it up. I kind of spaced it. You and I had talked about it.
And it was
Yeah,
on the whiteboard
probably
for how
about a
long?
week ahead or so. Yes, that's correct. You and I talked about it, and then we kind of had a couple, three, just real quick passing conversations about it. And then I found that I had sent an email to you asking, reminding, hey, our deadline's coming up. Would you be willing to fill out the AJRS? And then I think you responded the next morning. That would have been Thursday morning, I believe, or it might have been like late Wednesday afternoon. You said, well, I don't have time. Would you do it for me? And then I did do it for you. But
I didn't
Commissioner,
ask you to do, I don't recall asking you to do it for me. I did come in late that afternoon, and you graciously said, no, it's done. And so I'll go back and check my emails to see when I did the phone code to the other commissioners, and I'm betting that was on Tuesday to encourage them to call in or ask them to call in. But in the interest of our discussion here, I'm gonna protest that the public knows that both my agenda items today were removed, and I don't understand why. It is shocking. It is, at the very least, is hypocritical, and I think they were valid. So I will I'll pursue that more later on. That's all I have. Thank you.
And I say, I do have the document, so that'll be the end of this discussion. I think we're ready now to go into executive session. It's 4:05. Are these
Pass those down.
just like that?
Yep. And then that one, the next one is yours. That's
It's mine?
Commissioner Boyce.
Okay.
And then that's the announcement for you right there, Mr. Chair.